cookie, as in nom nom.
Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 362. I'm one of your hosts, Bryan, and I'm joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello, hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody.
And as is a tradition on JudgeCast, whenever we don't have a big topic that we want to talk about, but instead we each want to bring something kind of smaller, a little bite-sized nibble of a conversation, if you will. We have one of these little potpourri episodes where everybody brings at least one thing, small thing that they want to talk about. This maybe not a whole episode, but still, judge related, and we want to make sure that it gets out there. So in this episode, we've each brought forward at least one little morsel, little treat to talk about.
Just
Marcos?
a treat.
Yeah, a nugget, if you will.
Yes, it also is great because we don't have to write like a full episode and each person gets to do their own little thing, and it saves me a lot of work.
Yeah,
doesn't save Charlie. He's still got to edit the
show notes are
stuff.
half a page. So.
Yeah.
And
all
mostly
right.
my notes.
We have show notes?
Yeah, right. My show notes. I didn't even write my show notes, and it's 4 whole words. So, who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
this is going to be an interesting one in that this year has been unique for me because I've been actively seeking out and judging other games. For example, I was the... Yeah,
You've been cheating on us?
Traitor.
I have been. Well, what can I say? I'll save that for when I'm talking about this, but...
Disloyal.
Well, you see, when other game developers demonstrate their willingness to... that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a second. But let's talk about
all right.
some of the experiences I've had this last year. So I got a chance to head judge what was the first major Riftbound tournament in the United States at SCG Vegas not too long ago. There's 10K there that was 400-something players, huge event. It was a blast. It was challenging. It was something new to learn. And similar to how, like, a couple years ago, I judged my first CEDH event and went, that's new and interesting. I found that judging other games can also scratch that itch of looking for something new and interesting, because a lot of judges, especially ones who travel around a lot, who are on the road at some of these bigger events quite often, like Brandon last week said, he judged like 20 plus weekends and events this year. I'm actually in the same boat as him. I think I did like 23 weekends this year. And it's like, when you do it that often, you want to find something that is new, a new kind of challenge, and applying the judging skills that you have learned through Magic to other games and is really, really interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, you get to see just how good Magic has it.
Yeah.
Because, oh boy, some policy documents in other games are rough. Regardless of how long the games have been out. Like, there are some policy documents in games that have been out for a few years at this point that are still, I think, in need of work. Some games are relatively new and only have like one iteration on their rules and policy documents. And same thing, you'll find if they don't directly, let's say, pay homage to Magic documents, they're at the very least largely trying to adopt them or figuring out that it's a little more challenging than you might think to reinvent the wheel. But all that aside, I think it's a really interesting thing that everybody should consider, at the very least, to try out another game that you might be into. And the cool thing about this is there's a lot. Literally, I wrote these all out to make sure I did not forget them. But at SCG Vegas, there were competitive and regular tournaments for Riftbound, for Star Wars Unlimited, for Lorcana, for Vibes, Sorcery, Wonders of the First, Bo Jackson's Battle Arena.
Boba.
I found out recently that Pokemon is coming to Star City Games in Atlanta. One Piece has been at an SCG event before. Flesh and Blood is often at SCG events as well, and Flesh and Blood was at Vegas as well. All of these games, along with Magic and the regional championships, were all happening in Las Vegas in one weekend. So suffice to say, there's a lot of opportunities out there to
and not
test
just
your
tied
skills.
to Star City games, right? It's like
Oh, yeah.
there's shocking Pokemon has standalone tournaments.
Yeah, this is the first time you're seeing them at an SCG coming up, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been running events. There are some major events for all of these games that are being run all over the place. In fact, Beepril will be talking a little bit later on, I think, about his experience in Houston last week for Riftbound.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. But there's a lot of interesting opportunities here. And another thing that I found really, really interesting about judging some of these other events, I've been primarily focusing on Star Wars Unlimited because I'm a huge fan of that game, along with Riftbound. But I've noticed that there's a lot of mentorship opportunities out there because you'll find that people who gravitate towards these games are in the same place that you once were as a Magic judge if you're more experienced. Of, hey, I'm really into this game. I really want to help grow it. I want to see something more develop from it. Let me jump in and try and help my LGS run things. And then they end up at, let's say, the Galactic Championships that were in Las Vegas this year for Star Wars Unlimited. And you realize, hey, they might not have as many reps at an event of this scale and size. So it's actually a really interesting space, both if you're a very experienced judge or a brand new judge looking to jump into a game that you just really care about and are really passionate about. And that's something I haven't been able to experience for a long time because I'm an old hand at this Magic thing at this point. So it's been a lot of fun.
It is very interesting when you start looking at the events that are out there. We've had for the longest time, pre-pandemic era, when there were 40 some odd Magic Fests throughout the year, MFs throughout the year, or 40 some odd GPs, you could, kind of make your full-time job grinding those events. It was possible. You were sleeping on people's sofas and stuff like that, but that could be your job. Right?
Yeah.
And we don't have that anymore. Like it is very hard, but if you diversify, there are starting to be between One Piece, Riftbound, Pokemon, Fab, like Magic, Star Wars. There is starting to be, if you can context switch and you can make the jump, it's feasible to have just judging be your job. Not exclusively Magic, but yeah. And supporting your LGS, definitely they're looking to run more different events. And if you come in there and say, I am a Magic judge and I am a Star Wars judge and I can figure out Riftbound because basically it's Magic with a few quirks, you can. That is a great selling point.
Yeah, definitely helps you stand above others.
Card games are not as, they want to brand themselves as unique, but in the end, when it comes to running a tournament, the rules and guidelines that it takes to actually run the tournament are pretty much the same across the board. You mentioned that there are some that are struggling with their policy documents, and that's to be expected because companies want to do their own thing. They don't want to be accused of being a clone of one thing or another, of course. And they also will sometimes think, well, we know better. And, I know you chuckle. Maybe they're right sometimes. But Magic's
there
been
are
around
varying
for 30,
degrees of success there. Yeah.
Magic's been around for 30 years plus, and I think they have a pretty good handle on how to write policy that is repeatable, which is terribly important from one event to the next, and not open to a tremendous amount of interpretation. There's a little wiggle room there, here and there, I'm sure. But most of it is pretty clear, straightforward, well designed, and appreciated. So, those skills I've been asked. I'm sure you've both been asked. I know you've both been asked, but I've been asked too. I've been asked, will you work a cookie run event? Will you work a Riftbound
What event?
at Cookie Run is also another trading card game.
Cook and Run or Cookie Run?
Cookie, as in nom nom, Cookie Run. I don't make up
Wow.
the names of these things.
Cookie is in nom nom.
There you go.
Got it.
People are out here playing all these different games, and they need officials to help make these things happen, both at your LGS and elsewhere. If you're not comfortable taking on a role at SCGCon, talk to your store and find out what they need help with. Dip your toe in the water, see what's out there.
Yeah, and Bryan mentioned something really important. Just because you've been a Magic judge for a long time, like let's say you're very experienced in Magic, been doing it for a while, I think there it's actually harder to branch out into other games because you are so set in your ways. And you're so used to how Magic policy and how Magic rules work. And sometimes they just do not work that way because the mechanics of another game just don't even think in the same way. And that kind of code switching is challenging sometimes. But still worth it and still rewarding, especially again if you really find you have that passion for that game, definitely give it a shot.
All right.
Who's next?
I will talk about, not timely or topical anything, but I'd kind of like to talk about the reversing decision section of the MTR.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. So for many, many years, we kind of had a weird way of dealing with situations where if a player they take an island and they play it, they put it on the battlefield and they play the island and then they take their hand off of it and then like, oh, wait, nope, that's supposed to be a swamp. Or they played one, they tap one and they play like a 1-mana artifact and they meant to play the other 1-mana artifact in their hand, right? Or they'd say, someone attack them and they go, no blocks. Wait, no, I do want to block. Okay, those were situations where we informally had policies to allow players to do those kind of things, but they weren't documented anywhere. They were just kind of in judge lore. Okay, and it was a thing that you learned about when you went to the larger events and you'd be having conversations. It wasn't really written down anywhere. And so several years ago, and by they I mean like Toby and the WotC folks, they created the reversing decisions section of the MTR. So this is section 4.8. Okay, and I'm going to read it. It says, the first sentence is, players are expected to consider their options before taking an action, and players are not usually allowed to take back an action that has been communicated to their opponent, either verbally or physically. Period. End of paragraph. And everyone's like, hey, that sounds A-okay to me. But then you go, but that's also kind of strict. Like in the situation of, this isn't chess, like when you take your hand off the queen, suddenly you're like locked in. So the next paragraph starts with, sometimes a player will realize that they've made a wrong decision after making a play. If that player has not gained any information since taking the action and they wish to make a different decision, a judge may allow that player to change their mind. All right. Judges must carefully consider whether the player has gained information since making the play that might have affected the decision. In particular, players may not try to use an opponent's reaction, or lack thereof, to see if they should modify their actions they've committed to. If a judge cannot be sure no information was gained, they should not allow the decision to be changed. And then there's a little bit clause about teammates intervening before information is acceptable. Like when you're playing in a team game, you're kind of all considered like one brain. And it gives examples. A player plays an island and before anything else happens goes, wait, I meant to play a swamp, no blocks. Or they say, go, no wait, land, go. Like these are examples of takesy backsies. This is a kind of a both a simple and subtly complex policy at the same time, because it can feel a little weird. Like if you're the opponent and the player has made a mistake and they realize that they made a mistake after they make it, there might be the tendency to be like, no, we need to hold them to it. But
right, you
again,
want the advantage.
Yeah, you want the advantage. It's not fair. My opponent should be allowed to make technical mistakes. But also, we realize that as it says, a player can realize that they made a wrong decision after they make the play. And then where we draw the line, where we use the line, is if a player has not gained information since taking that action, they wish to make a different decision. What's not said anything in policy is talking about time. Okay, information hasn't changed, so whether it's a half a second or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, okay, if the information hasn't changed anyway, then a player can realize, oh wait, I want to take that back. Okay, so that's kind of what the reversing decision policy is. Now, it's got a particular call out in here that says players may not try to use their opponent's reaction or lack thereof. So you can't be like, play Crater Hoof and then like look at your opponent and like eyeball lock them and get a soul read on them. And then, when they look down at their hand and like flick to the third or fourth card, you're like, actually, no. Or they look at their 2 blue mana or something like that, that kind of thing. You can't use or judge those kind of reactions. And realistically, a lot of the times in Commander, where you're like, I swing out and attack, and then the opponent goes, all my creatures have death touch, and you're like, whoa, hold on, no, I don't attack then. That is not a type of thing that is allowed by the reversing decisions policy, because you kind of just gain new information. That information was, oh crap, they have death touch. Whoops. And sometimes the new information could be being reminded of information that you should have that was available to you but you didn't notice,
or that you did already know but forgot.
Right. So what we look at is we look at the information gained with regard to whether or not we allow or disallow reversing decisions, because that's the only thing that is the most unambiguous thing. Time, your perception of time can be fairly ambiguous. All right. But yeah, that is the reversing decisions policy. And for folks that want to change it, I challenge you to come up with a policy that fits. All right, because obviously we say players are expected to consider their actions before taking action, and they don't want takesy backsies until it's you flub up and you play that island instead of that swamp, and then you're like, oh wait, no, actually I do. And sometimes players, you folks go in the tank sometimes, and you'll play your land or whatever, and then you'll just stare at things, and then you'll realize, wait a second, I played the wrong land because I was planning my strategy, and when I looked at the cards in my hand, there was something wrong, like there was something off. I didn't have the right thing. So that's what we look at. We look at information.
Yep.
Magic is a complicated game. Who knew?
Yeah.
And, it's good that that policy stresses involvement of a judge at several points in there. But the funny thing is that a lot of things in a natural game state, in a natural sequence of events, players won't even necessarily involve a judge in this situation. And that's fine, really. It happens all the time. It happens all the time in regular. It happens all the time, even in competitive. Involve a judge when you're not sure. Please. Absolutely. I'm not saying don't involve a judge. I'm just saying that this happens more than players are probably willing to admit or realize in the regular course of events. So, yeah.
I also want to say that you want to keep things, when reversing decisions, you want to keep things very simple. Like, you could construct a situation where, I've got a bunch of cards in my hand and my opponent has no cards in their hand and they're completely tapped out. And
right.
So I play a card, do a thing, activate maybe not activate draw a card, but I do a bunch of stuff. Okay, my opponent is sitting there like a rock, and then I go, oh, well, I would like to do something different so that I can have a different creature to attack back. I'd like to reverse a whole bunch of decisions because I haven't gained any information. No, you know, you can't use the reversing decisions policy to kind of like dry run your turn against a goldfish. All right,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't really be trying to trying to like take your turn and then see that it wasn't going to go well and then rewind a bunch of stuff. That's not what the reversing policy decision is for. So that's reversing decisions.
So my thing for tonight is weird. I feel I'm going to be honest, a little conflicted about talking about it, but I'm going to spend a few minutes on it anyway because I think it's important. I want to speak it into being, and I want to share my thoughts about something because I know that this was a tough year for a lot of judges at local stores from the months June to until just recently, because as far as standard goes and as far as competitive play goes, there was a little problem with standard play in the form of a weird little mage from Final Fantasy called Vivi. And he kind
Vivi.
of, Vivi kind of almost dominated some amount of competitive play, whether or not you saw that at your LGS as much or whether you saw that at RCQs and larger events. Wherever spikes were, generally you saw a lot of Vivi, and Vivi was winning a lot of games. The Vivi decks were anywhere between tier 1 and tier 0 in some cases, at least until the mono red deck came along a little bit later. They were overpowering. So why is this a weird topic? It's a weird topic because we deal with rules, we deal with policy, we deal with all kinds of things. We don't deal with banned and restricted announcements. It's not really our providence. We'll report on it sometimes, but it's not really an area that we concern ourselves with as JudgeCast. However, we do talk to judges, and judges, I think, by and large, were affected by the lack of change, the lack of a banned announcement in a timely fashion. I, for one, was not able to work two events because they did not launch. Why did they not launch? Because players were tired of choosing either Vivi or losing, was how many of them saw it. It was really, really bad. I know a large store that only got 16 players for a standard RCQ when they would normally get in the 30s, maybe even 40s. It was a tough season, and it was made tougher by the scheduling. So here's the schedule. Around June, they had a ban where they banned Corey Steel, Cutter, Monstrous Rage, and a few others. Right.
Yeah.
That was at the end of June. At that time, they announced when their next band announcement was going to be, and it was going to be at the end of November. Almost 6 months, 5 months, right? But unfortunately, even at that time, Vivi was starting to come into being. And then we got one or two more sets in between then and the November when they actually did the next banned and restricted announcement, which wasn't November 24th. They moved it up to November 10th. That was big of them. They shaved 2 weeks off of it. But the problem was that they saw were a couple of things. Wizards saw that the schedule for their announcements didn't quite match competitive play, the seasons that they had. So they didn't want to cut off the players that were playing a particular deck and had invested in it. They didn't want to force players who were traveling and who had made commitments to for hotels and for whatever else under the belief that they were going to play a particular deck. They basically, Wizards was basically immobilized, and they were immobilized for 5 months. And they did it out of fear that players in the past have expressed difficulty with the idea of emergency bans. They don't like them.
Yeah,
Well, sure.
they are kind of I agree. I think they're overvaluing that. Well, players don't like it when their cards get banned, kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. I think that's a big part of what my point is that I would like there to be on Wizards part a little bit more awareness over what damage this did to their season, and actually a lot more awareness, because next year we're not going to have 6 standard sets, we're going to have 7 standard sets. When you do the math on it, that means that the meta could literally change almost every 7 weeks, because it doesn't take long for players to figure out the meta. And once they figure it out, the decks pretty much stay homogenous during that time period. But when the next set releases, that can disrupt the meta that exists, meaning that players have to invest in cards all over again, unless there's something that's oppressive like Vivi or, Corey Steele's
So,
card or whatever.
opinion question
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Counter argument. If
Yeah.
new sets are being injected every 7.4 weeks, doesn't that give more opportunities for the problematic deck / card to be unseated as
Yes.
top dog?
Oh, absolutely. But when it doesn't happen 2 weeks into the new season, you need to start to look at it.
2 weeks? Is 2 weeks enough time? Like,
It doesn't.
I realize I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit.
Yeah, devil needs no advocate. The thing is that the devil doesn't need an advocate. The thing is that pro players and data miners and everybody have gotten so good at figuring out what works that it takes very little time for the group mind, for the group think to settle on what decks are going to be the decks of that season. It really doesn't take long. Every once in a while, you'll find that weird outlier, but that weird outlier is not an exception to the rule. It's not a reason to sit there and say, okay, we shouldn't be more progressive about this. At least that's what I think. I don't know.
I think having, like, let's say VV existed as a problem, which it was, but there were 4 standard decks a year, every 3, quarterly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Wizards doing their approach of, well, let's see if the next set will take care of it. That means we're looking at, 4, 5, 6 months of VV because there isn't another set. So I can't believe I'm going to say this, but with respect to problematic cards, having frequent sets come in and inject change
is probably
might
possibly better.
Yeah, I don't
It's
want
possibly
to use the term better because it's too much. It's awful
relative.
in general.
Yeah.
But in this narrow slice of the problem,
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Like, there were several events that I judged that I was excited to be in a red shirt for, and because Vivi was in the format, they were kind of on the small side.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I'm not going to name names, but there is a very large event where turnout was really low, and it was because Vivi was still in the room. It's
all the more reason to get involved in other games.
All the more reason to get involved in other games. I love that. But I do want to close with this thought: is that just I wish Wizards would be more open to the concept of an emergency ban when it's actually really necessary. And I think this past fall demonstrated a time period in this game's story where it was necessary, and they should have stepped up to the plate on this one. That's my feeling on it. That's my potpourri topic.
Okay.
Fair. Cool. I don't disagree with you there. I think it's hard. I think back to like Kaladesh era where they were suddenly having a lot of bans. Like, that was when they first really started opening up the ban hammer again after not doing it for many, many years. And I heard the outcrying of people saying, oh no, too many bannings is bad, etc., etc. I'm like, I actually don't mind. I think it's fine. I'd much rather have a format that I want to play and I want to show up for, as opposed to a dead format that I'm required to play because it's the only option for this thing that I have to play in.
Right. And by quantity, this has been a heavy year for bans in terms of just in standard alone. They've had 10, 11, some number of cards banned. I've judged years where I couldn't remember one card being banned in standard. It's been,
it used to be unheard of.
Yeah, people talk about power creep. I'm not worried about power creep. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm glad that they're making adjustments. I just wish that they would have made it an adjustment faster this time around. That's it. That's my bit.
All right. So my next one that I do want to talk about
Yeah.
ties into both of these topics in what Charles was just talking about and the judging other games. When you have, we've noticed that we are in a bit of a TCG boom right now. Some call it a bubble, some call it a boom, but there's a lot of TCGs out there. I listed them all out before. I'm not going to do it again, but it was a lot. And it even came up in our episode last week, if you remember Brandon mentioning it, that other TCGs are taking some of the talent that was focused entirely on Magic, and they're now splitting their attention between multiple games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to that end, the same thing is happening with players. And my second thing I want to discuss is how important it is as a player to support your LGS.
Yeah.
Like Charles said, Standard has been rough this year. Standard events did not launch in a lot of areas, including things like your regularly scheduled FNMs, the places where everybody communes and plays Magic and gets to be social with each other, where you can chat with that judge and possibly, demonstrate your interest in judging. When it's a regular thing for you to be doing, you're engaging more with the game you love, you're engaging more with your local game store, which is helping all of us who are entering into judging and who have been judging for a long time have a place to call home and have a place where we can develop those skills and even just interact with people. Like, I can't tell you how much I have looked forward to the weekly play at my LGS especially over the last couple of years, where I find most of my interaction with TCGs is working events and judging. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I want to sit down and I want to play in an FNM. I want to play in an RCQ. I want to play in my Star Wars Unlimited Weekly and open some, weekly play boosters. Like, this is the thing that got me into judging in the first place. And what I've been noticing is not only is in Magic Standard really rough over the last year or so, but also so many new games are also cannibalizing the established TCG market. Like, there's a lot of players who were just Magic players who looked at Lorcana when it first came out and went, ooh, that's interesting. And like 3 or 4 of the normal, like, let's say 40-person group that would show up to your FNM, 3 or 4 went off and decided to start playing some Lorcana on Wednesday nights. Oh, and Star Wars came out, and like 5 or 6 went off to go play Star Wars. And now Riftbound is out, and like 10 are going over to Riftbound. And you find...
Here's a thing that probably feeds into that. There's so many Magic sets coming out right now that you can kind of just say, you can take off a set or two and instead buy Riftbound cards, buy One Piece cards, buy Star Wars cards. And then when you realize that they only come out with sets every 3 months or 4 months, it's so refreshing.
So I've been very into Star Wars. They just came out with a new set in November, Secrets of Power. And the next set isn't coming out until March. And that's awesome. I actually get to sit down and play with these cards. There's planetary qualifiers that are coming out over the next couple of months where I can go and try some of these decks that I've been brewing. And like, I get to sit with and enjoy this new set that came out that I'm actually really enjoying gameplay wise. All these things are factors. And the more that the player base gets divided amongst different games, the more your LGS needs you to show up for those games. Like,
just get
okay, if you're into Star Wars, cool, just make it your thing. Show up and be the Star Wars person and be there at their weekly events every week. Because what I fear, and I'm starting to see little hints that this might be something we need to be keeping an eye on, is that some of these LGSs are seeing so many of their regulars branching off into different areas and losing interest in the thing that brought them there in the first place, which often has been Magic. that they're not able to launch enough events in the same way that they have been in the past. And then they have to start worrying about how they're going to meet their bottom line. And if your home shop goes away,
Or
that's a
Friday Night
problem.
Star Wars becomes a thing. Right?
That's an added
So for that
complication
matter.
too. Most all stores have limited play space. Let's say they've got space for 32 players. Maybe it's a nice little mid-sized store. If they've got Fab and they've got Lorcana and they've got Gundam and Yu-Gi-Oh and whatever, there are only so many nights in a week. There are going to be nights where you've got 3 or 4 or 5 events running at the same time for those 32 chairs.
Yeah.
It's very easy to see something pushed out as a result.
Yeah. And if it's Warhammer, those players are feral. They'll cut you if you try and take their Warhammer night away from them. So, you know.
And they take up so much space.
They do. Oh,
Warhammer
players are the worst.
I literally had to put Fab...
#, official JudgeCast commentary.
I literally had to put Fab players onto Warhammer tables 2 weeks ago.
Oh, jeez.
Because that's how much space we had left.
Yeah.
Luckily, nobody was there playing Warhammer that night. But I mean, this is an interesting problem. It's a problem that is not going to go away immediately because these games are developing their fan bases. They're in their rising arc. They're not in their we've settled into where we are growth wise. They're in we're still finding new players to introduce to our games, and they're excited about it, and we're going to have fun with them. It's going to be a real challenge for stores, for TOs, for judges, for players to figure out how to spend their money where they want to be.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think one big thing I just can't say enough as both a player and as a judge, show up and support your LGSs. Like, I really try to work with my LGS to make sure I can still be available to run RCQs and things like that for them. I ran the first CEDH event at my LGS recently, and I made sure to be available for them because I know, like, I'm on the road a bunch, but you know what? I want to be there to help them and make sure that their first CEDH event is successful so that they can run more and that more people can come and check out this shop.
Yeah, I've got a CEDH event coming up in my store, and I'm not judging it. But hey, that's me. That's a personal choice.
Not just as a judge, as a player too. About 2 weeks ago, I saw a comment on Twitter where someone said something about CED and Marcos, I'm sorry, but is CEDH players who do proxies are really entitled because they make demand. It was a store owner who was expressing frustration about these proxy playing CEDH players make demanding events when they don't spend money on cards. Like, it was basically like, the amount of money you spend at my store does not justify the demands at which you are making that I changed to support your air quotes business. I'm paraphrasing. But like, in response to that, what's that?
I think I saw that post too. Yeah.
Yeah. And in response to that, there was a whole bunch of people like, I don't owe you any purchases kind of thing. And it's sort of like, well, if you go to play in the store, you kind of do, right?
Check out their wares. You're there.
Right.
Why wouldn't you?
It's not a clubhouse. The clubhouse model has proven over and over again to be not successful. You need to support the store that you're going to be playing in. You need to.
You need to spend more than like 2 bags of chips and a $1.50 can of soda. Like that doesn't cut it. So
at that point, you might as well be running a CVS. Like, just not worth it.
It's just not worth it. Right. CVS makes money. What are you talking about?
I know.
Yeah.
Selling all those monsters.
So that's the thing. I guess, Marcos, if it sums up, support your LGS because you'll miss it if it's gone.
100%. And think about if you're a senior judge and you've been around for a while, think about the shops that you first worked in that gave you your first shot at running your first FNM or running your first competitive event, whether it's a GPT, PPTQ, RCQ, whatever. And imagine how a new judge will feel when there are almost no opportunities to have that same experience as you did. Or even just pay back that shop for giving you that opportunity in the first place so many years ago and support them. Like, Every chance I get, I want to make it to my LGS, and I want to spend money with my LGS as opposed to other places because I feel like I do owe it to them.
Speaking of new judges, I want to just highlight something for a moment.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a second this limbo that we're in as Magic judges, and it's not just the U.S. In fact, the U.S. does have a system. It's those outside the U.S. and Canada where there's really no system that supports them. What I'm hoping for is that in the very near future we see even a stopgap that gives these judges, that these people that want to become judges, a way to become judges. But what I want to also say is this: if you want to judge an event, you don't have to be certified to do so. Talk to the store, talk to another judge that's nearby, start to get those reps in. You can work an event, run it regular as Joe nobody walking in off the street if you have demonstrated that you care and you have some rules knowledge and you're willing to learn some basic policy stuff. It's not hard. We've been putting together all the L1 Essentials things. Those, yes, they're all in English, but I'm hoping that people outside the country are using them, and you can use them to gain the knowledge that you need to work towards L1. And as you're working towards L1, you can work an event. So while I'm hopeful that Wizards...
To your point, you say working towards L1.
Yeah.
What is, if you're overseas in a place that doesn't have a judge program, what does working towards L1 even mean?
It means that you're at least getting the point where you can test when the system is put in place, whatever system will be whenever it will come.
Right, but I guess my point is, what is the bar when you say I can be an L1 when the system is put in place? You don't know what you don't know what L1 is going to look like when a different system is put in place.
I don't.
Right?
Right.
Like,
but if you work under a judge and if there is no system that certifies, I don't know.
Yeah, and that is to your point. That's kind of one of the things where inside the U.S. you've got Judge Foundry, inside Canada you've got Judge Foundry. Outside, it's a lot more nebulous. It's a lot more murky, and even inside the U.S., people are like, "Well, why should I bother being a member of Judge Foundry when I can just judge on my own?" And there's a ton of support. And a lot of that support is left over from the legacy program, from Judge Academy, it's just there. We've got a bunch of events. We've got a lot of old farts that are around doing stuff. But if you are in an area that doesn't have a lot of events, doesn't have a lot of legacy judges, you're kind of left on your own.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if Wizards does come up with a judge program, if they say like, hey, you don't actually have to be certified through us to work events, they're kind of undercutting their own, judge program, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. What I'm saying is in places outside the U.S. where there isn't a program currently, if you want to judge, I'm saying that there's a path forward for you to do that at the store level, I'm sure. If you express interest and if you can maybe work with somebody who's an existing judge.
Speaking about working as a judge with little to no judge experience, I worked a Riftbound event this weekend.
Hey, how'd that go?
Hey, ask me how much I know about the Riftbound rules.
What do you know about? Have you even played a game of Riftbound?
I have not played a game of Riftbound.
There we go. That's what we need to know.
I have watched 2 learn to play videos.
Oh.
And I had to have someone explain it to me as like, oh, no. You see, you have an emblem, and then you have a companion, and then your mana's in a separate deck. And I was like, oh, okay, yep. Got it. But I was very familiar. I read the tournament rules. I read all of the tournament rules, and I read all of the pre-game setup for all of the formats because this weekend I was one of the on-demand leads at Riftbound Houston, which does not actually require you to know a whole lot of the rules. Okay? Because mostly what I am doing is space management and then making sure that that players go from registration to scorekeeper to judges to floor. and it is very focused on the people moving, and it was extremely similar to Magic in that regard. You know, we've talked behind the scenes about having an episode on like what skills transfer between games, and you know, rules knowledge obviously doesn't super transfer, but some policy stuff does. Leadership and like concepts of what type of leader you want to be absolutely does. And you know, if you're trying to get four players together in a free for all Riftbound pod or a commander game, you know, that's kind of the mechanics of that are kind of the same. You're gonna have people that you've got the on demand events, and you've got two people that have signed up, and then a pot of four come up, and they want to register, but they don't want to break up two and two, so they want to be in a pod together. So the registration person creates another event and puts those four people in, but you got to remember to go back for those two, you know, as like single riders come up and you can fill those in. But then another pot of three comes up, and you can't put the pot of three in with the pot of two, so you create another event, and so now you've got five players that are waiting for a four-person event, you know. And the scorekeeper doesn't know why there's a whole bunch of pods, because then another three-person pod comes up, and just dealing with that, and then you finally get the pod of four, but since it's been 10 minutes, one of them has decided to go to the bathroom, and you can't find him anymore, and the players have already been waiting. So I will say this about Riftbound, though.
Is
Calling
this a
for
hot take?
players. Yeah, calling for players in Riftbound kind of sucks. And the reason why is because they use your Riot IDs instead of your name. So
Ooh,
like,
I did see this.
I'm calling for Chud Thumper 29 and Swagzilla 64 and Boy 6969.
There were some really unfortunate names that I saw posted.
Right. And so it was awkward because it's Riftbounders, not Magic players, and it's 4-player free for all, not Commander. You know, it was really, really hard when I'd get on the mic. I'd have to like go over in my head and just like, oh, don't say Magic, don't say Magic, don't say. And then you get in your head, it's like, I've got to say Magic, I've got to remember of Riftbound players. But
I've done that
it,
so much.
yeah, it was a great opportunity to work with other people from other games and get their perspective on things. There was a lot of things that we as Magic judges just take for granted that absolutely blew the minds of other games, and problems that other games have that we don't need to solve. It was really, really fascinating. Like, I think it was in Pokemon, you are not allowed to ask for a concession.
Huh.
And the reason why you're not allowed to ask for concession is because a lot of times it's kids and adults playing.
Yeah.
Or at least this was my interpretation of why. Right.
Sure.
An adult asking for concessions is kind of
Intimidating,
it's
possibly.
it's going to imply some pressure. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. You talk about the differences. A few things I noticed is I kind of think that Magic judges are entitled. Okay, after seeing like at the end of Friday, there were some problems, there were some hiccups. All of our printers at the same moment decided that they weren't going to print because low toner, despite having toner. But it was really rough, and like a lot of like the Bandai judges, the Fab judges, the Star Wars judges, stuff like that were like, oh man, this event was really smooth. And the Magic judges were like, oh, there was behind the scenes, it was really, really rough. And it was just kind of a really interesting, different opinion. And us as judges, as Magic judges, we actually are kind of entitled. We enjoy a 30-year-old policy doc that was meticulously managed by folks and evolved into something very, very stable. We have major tournament organizers that really put a lot of effort and energy into streamlining and making their events excellent. You know, we have a community that really pushes and challenges each other and gives people an opportunity to learn. And I don't necessarily know if the other judge programs have it to the same degree that we do. But yeah, but also a lot of the skills, just to get back what we were talking about, a lot of the skills transfer. Like realistically, I didn't have to know how to play Riftbound beyond we were running 1v1, 2v2, and then this 4-player free-for-all. So I familiarized myself with what the setup was and how those modes and games were different. And then I just let the actual judges, like, so if a judge came up to me and said, like, I don't know how to seat the players for 2v2, I could tell them. That was a thing that I felt that was necessary for me to tell. But then if you asked me, like, what happens if a player misses the trigger on their battle? I'd be like, I don't, magic policy, And in fact, there was a bribery investigation that I had to do, where as I'm walking out on the field getting the debrief from the judge, I stopped Villarubia and was like, "Hey, Riftbound bribery policy for the opponent is the same as Magic or not?" Because basically, I was asking, do I have to DQ the opponent if they were offered a bribe and turned it down, right? And there was like, nope, there's nothing in there. And I was like, great. And I did a bribery investigation over inside event land, and all of those skills 100% transferable. Because it turns out offering money for ticks is offering to buy the win is bribery is bribery is bribery.
Yeah. I heard some stories from that weekend. It felt a little Wild West because one thing about Riftbound that I picked up from my 10K that I ran a few weeks back, in Riftbound, you have a very wide swath of players. You have the seasoned TCG players who are into the new hotness, who are trying to, eke out and do their spiky thing. And you have all the way down to, I've never touched a TCG before. I'm a hardcore League of Legends grinder online. What's a deck list? And
yes,
everything in between. And it's wild. Again, because we are so spoiled with, you show up to an RC, you're never really worried that anybody has any idea what Melee is. And in fact, you're usually a little surprised if they ask you, like, oh, what's Melee? I've never used it before. Like, oh yeah, let me help you out with that. And like, it's a rare find.
Yeah.
Not so with Riftbound players.
But from what I've learned is Riftbound tournament policy very, very similar to Magic, and actually more similar to Magic after this weekend, because there's that meme of like punching the blob into the little box. The little blob is like, I think I'm gonna come out of the box, and then something just punches them into the box, and it's like, never again. They tried to do a few things different with policy, and
they were pummeled.
It didn't work out so good, and now it's like, oh, that's why Magic does it. All right.
Yes.
Turns out there is a reason.
Right. But very, very similar, I think, if more so than Fab, more so than Star Wars, I think Riftbound is a game that you can make the jump to from Magic Judge fairly readily.
I think Star Wars is not that far off either. They're both very much. I have less problems.
So Star Wars has gotten better.
Yes,
because Star Wars
definitely
initially was rough. A little rough.
I was not around for the super early time. I really only started working on the judging side of things earlier this year, like in the springtime. So at that point, they'd already been going for about a year. So
Jonah had been on it for a while, and okay.
Yeah, and the thing I liked about Star Wars especially was they recognized that even though the policy documents are not quite where they need to be, there was kind of an understood thing of like, hey, if the head judge is probably a former or current Magic judge, they're gonna just handle it in a way that makes sense as opposed to what the policy that doesn't make sense says. So there was kind of a shadow policy of just like, just do it the right way, please.
That's a little bit of that like entitlement, like the Magic, where it's just like, just let the Magic judge do whatever. They'll know what they're doing.
That hand-waving thing has been in place since the beginning.
It has, and it's a valid thing because
these are not the droids you're looking for. This policy is not what you need.
This is not the policy you're looking for.
It's the same thing. It really is.
Yeah, 100%.
Like Riftbound, when I was studying for this thing, I ran across a section of in the tournament rules that said in Riftbound you have a sideboard that's 0 or 8 cards.
I still don't
And
understand
then, right, but I read that it was 0 or 8 cards, and then when I read the deck list problems, it was you would get a game loss if you registered less than that. And I was like, oh, that's going to be a problem. Does anybody know why they did it this way? And there was a little bit of discussion, and I was just like, you're not going to convince me that this is a good idea. And I had this discussion fairly publicly, and then on Saturday, someone came up to me very proudly and said, hey, that policy changed mid-tournament. And I was like, yeah, all right. Because
so
they got to see it in practice and they were like, oh, that's bad.
So now it's up to 8?
Yes.
Because that's what it should be. I have no idea why
I don't know
it was
if it's
0
actually been
or 8.
updated in the official, but that was how it went for the rest of the tournament.
Somebody explained that one to me, and I just looked at them cross-eyed, and they said, don't worry. I said, okay.
Yeah. They had their missed trigger policy. They put a change out right before the tournament because their missed trigger policy was like, as soon as they miss the trigger, it's missed. None of this like first makes first relevant to the game state kind of thing.
Punishing.
Anyway,
got it.
Anyway, kind of rambling a little bit now, but had a great time. The UVS folks, the Riot folks, the Laughing Dragon folks, those folks were all cool. Loved working with the registration people, the stage staff, the prize wall people.
Sounded like a blast.
Right. Like I left my soda. I asked the prize wall people, like on my way to the bathroom, I was like, hey, can I leave my soda here at the prize wall? Because I need to go to the bathroom. And they were like, sure. And when I came back, they were discussing whether or not to put a ticket price on it. Like my soda as it came up, and I was like, give me that. And they're like, ha, 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 got you, kind of thing. And it's just great. It's like, it was pretty cool. The players were, for the most part, really, really nice. There were a few that got a little indignant that their Riot ID names were not acceptable. Yeah, but otherwise, folks were super chill, super happy. Everybody was out there playing a game that they enjoyed, and
Awesome.
yeah, there's stuff outside of Magic if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a couple of Riftbound events coming up soon for me, so should be fun.
Yeah,
nice, very nice. Marcus, do you have anything else?
No, I think that about covers it. How about you?
Oh, I think I waxed poetical enough tonight.
Fair.
Bryan, any other final thoughts from you?
No.
You say that like there might be one, but you're not sure.
Yeah, it's. I made a comment this weekend about being a paragon of consent-based trolling, and Joe really wanted that to be my outro and said he was going to send me a reminder.
Oh my!
Wow.
Paragon of consent-based.
I am the paragon of consent-based trolling.
The lore of B-Pro continues.
I feel like this is a Gilbert and Sullivan show.
Okay.
I am a moderator.
No. For real, we found out that the place that we were going, they had a judge party after the event at a place called The Rustic, and one of the stage staff, Travis says, "Hey, they have a beer burrow," and I'm like, "A what?" And they're like,
what?
"They have a donkey that'll bring you beer." I'm like, how much is the donkey? And they're like, he says it's $900 for 2 hours. And I was like, you find 10 other people. Yeah, you find 10 other people and I'll chip in. And he was like, got it. And so low key Sunday, there was like this sub theme of trying to find enough people to split this donkey, to have him wander around the bar that we were at. And,
oh my god!
Yeah,
that explains so much of the chatter I saw from this weekend that I was very confused by.
Yeah,
did you get there?
Turns out the restaurant tried to make it happen, but acquiring it, like they don't keep the donkey on premises, but they were unable to acquire the donkey on like 5 hours notice on a Sunday. But This
you
was
got there,
this was a
you
thing.
just didn't get there. Okay.
Yeah, it didn't get there. But next time.
Oh, next time you'll let them know we're in it to win it.
Right. We know that we
From
need
the
to give them
get-go.
like 2 or 3 days heads up. So we're gonna make that happen. A beer burrow.
Oh, that's unreal.
Oh my god! Now I
Beer's
know what I'm
sold
doing next time I go
separately.
to Houston.
Okay, right.
You know,
But-
I've never really felt a strong draw towards Houston before, but this.
For the
Right?
story, at the very least.
Right. You're not buying a Corona. You're buying donkey equity.
You're buying hair on your Corona is what you're buying. I don't know what you're buying, but whatever
You're buying-
happens,
like, think of
I
it-
need
think
to
of it
see.
this way.
I need to see
You're
pictures,
buying an
so long as it
experience.
doesn't turn into Clerks 2.
Yeah, no, you are.
Yeah.
You're buying an experience. You're buying an event. You're buying a show.
Ooh, careful with the use of the word "show" there.
I said Clerks 2 first, and then you
I
said
know you
show.
did.
No, I was making that joke.
Anyways, that sounds like a wrap.
It does.
Happy
it does.
holidays,
We've gone
everybody.
way
That
up.
was
We've
fun.
gone way up.
That was fun. All right, that's our episode. Sorry, CJ. We know you're hoping for it, but we didn't do a Festivus show this year. Maybe next year. Who knows? We'll see. Join us next time as we talk about why the dollar is weakening against the euro. Oh, wait, that's the wrong topic. It'll be a new year when we come back, so we'll have to see what 2026 has to offer. We already know we'll be getting 7 sets to review next year, so there's that. Yay? Until then, you can send us an email at judgecast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on BlueSky at judgecast.bsky.social and on Twitter at JudgeCast. Don't forget to check out our show notes for these links and more, including our YouTube channel, where you can find this podcast and our L1 Essential series. While you're at it, hop onto our Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. I'm Charles Feather, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
I'm Bryan Perlman, and this ending kind of snuck up on me, so I don't got nothing. I'll make a New Year's resolution to come up with better outros next time.